One of those nights, man.
I've actually been drinking this. I bought this and then I was like, oh, this is. I remembered the commercials. This is a bit of a I don't know. It's really good, and I've been filling my void and keeping my my Garmin watch statistics higher by just drinking this instead of real beer like I want to.
Oh, well done. Well done. I think they have those at Energizer Park.
Oh, do they really?
I think, and I know they have the Schlafly ones. The what's that partnership one that they have?
Well-being is the other one I have.
That might be it. I'm thinking of.
Well, I know they're a St. Louis company and it's pretty good. But I want to try more St. Louis ones. I forgot this wasn't a St. Louis brand when I got it. So
it's a good one though. Actually, when I was in San Diego, they had a stand. I don't know where they're from, but when I was in San Diego, they had a stand there sampling them, and it was hilarious because you'd get people get in line. They're like, "Oh, free beer."
It's Milford, Connecticut, and San Diego. I thought San Diego.
Oh well, there you go. There you go.
And this one has like San Diego loyal colors as well. So.
Oh, okay, that works. Not San Diego FC, San Diego loyal. Exactly. I can buy.
What are you drinking though? You have the real thing.
I've got the Little Fritz, Urban Chestnut's Little Fritz. It's nice. It's a nice. I feel it's a nice drink to have for the KTRS portion of our pod before we really just cut loose and get into it on the wind down.
What type of beer is that?
It's like a Schnickel Fritz, orange peel, citrus wheat.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's a smaller, lighter version of the Schnickel Fritz. Less than 100 calories on the can.
So I like it, and actually some flavor.
Actually, some flavor. Good evening, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Fantastic evening, beautiful day in St. Louis, and
Jeremy and Soccer Zombie are on.
Beautiful time to be a City fan, I would say. Why not?
I'm a Jeremy.
It's hope springs eternal, as they say.
The Looligans have a different one about hope.
It's the hope that kills you. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's.
I actually just watched that episode of Ted Lasso the other day. We're doing a rewatch. We just finished the first season, and it was the hope that kills you. It's the hope that kills you.
Love it. Great crowd. We got Tim.
Yeah, we hopefully Phil. people are double screening it with the Blues game.
It's a must win. I didn't realize the home streak was so long. Saw that today from Timmerman. That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I on the inverse of that, our record after going down 2-0 is abysmal. So this is the night to do it. Yeah, I've got the Blues game down here on my phone, so we're covered there. And spoiler alert for our wind down. Yeah, I've got some notes on what Twellman said on ESPN. I've got some notes and I've got some stats, and I agree with him in some things, disagree with him in others. So we're not going to go diving into media on media violence for KTRS. And then, 9:00 during this pod, it'll be CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinals. Vancouver hosting Inter Miami, in which Messi might have made his first trip to the Pacific Northwest of the border.
Wild. Who's on the other side of the semifinal? That's amazing.
You would put me on the spot there.
I'm sorry.
I've been like laser focused on this one because of Vancouver last week.
It's to be decided, but it's Tigres versus Cruz Azul.
Cruz Azul, yeah. Part of me wishes that they would reseed the teams after they get to the semifinals to avoid a situation like this. I don't know. In international tournaments like this, it annoys me when you have one side that ends up in the semifinal from the same league. I mean, if
you seed MLS and Liga MX teams equally on both sides of the table, you've done your job, and the rest is up to fate and talent.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I do see what you mean.
Yeah, Cruz Azul and Tigres play again on May 1st.
Okay, it's a 1-1 draw so far. And the game was at Tigres, so Cruz Azul's coming in with the they're the benefactors here.
That
home team in the second leg. Well, we should go, actually. You ready?
Yeah. I like shooting the shit, but let's go.
Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We have a special show today. I say that a lot, don't I? But we have a lot to talk about in that we've closed a transfer window and we have things to talk about. I think we were all worried there wouldn't be something to talk about, but there's more than one thing to talk about tonight, and I'm excited to do so, and especially to do so with Matt Baker. Matt, how's it going, man?
Going okay, Phil. It's been a long week. It's been a winding road, ups and downs of emotion, just to see if we'll be able to bolster our team at all. And it feels like the game is almost secondary at this point for the hope that we hope springs eternal in a reinforcement and cementing one of our fan favorites for another probably few years.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fear of not getting anything done has slightly been surpassed by, not a groundbreaking transfer signing, but one that does spring hope eternal. I completely agree with that sentiment there, Matt. And let's dig right into it. I think the first one that we should, of course, talk about is the hometown boy, in a way, Simon Betcher. His option has been purchased and picked up from his team in Sweden. I'm going to get it. Bodo Glimt? Is that where he came from?
Denmark, AC Horsens.
Darn it. Yep. I'm not even going to give my excuse. That was all on me. Matt, why don't you do a better job of giving the details than I just did?
He wasn't there very long, to be fair. I mean, he had just been sold from Vancouver. Didn't play a ton for AC Horsens. But yes, Simon Betcher has been officially signed to St. Louis City SC through the end of the 2026 season with club options for 2027 and 2028. It was reported by our friend Manuel Veth at Transfermarkt that the fee that we paid to pick up the option on Betcher's loan was around 220,000 euros. 20% of that goes to Vancouver because he had a sell-on clause when AC Horsens bought him from Vancouver. And so the overall price for Betcher is palatable. This was basically, if you think about it in comparison to the man we're going to talk about in a moment, more guaranteed money sent to AC Horsens than guaranteed money sent to Atlanta United for that transfer. Compared to that, it makes the second move we're going to talk about look great. But in comparison to other teams in the league, it's still pennies. You're still talking about 220,000 euros, $250,000 or so, whatever the transfer rate is at this point. I think it was a fantastic move to bolster depth, to give us consistency in our attack. And we saw what Betcher did at the end of last season for us. We know the quality he has. We know that the talent is there. And I think this secures that player on the field, but also a fan favorite off the field with his connection to SLU.
Yeah, and he has a profile of a player that we absolutely need to have in our lineup. Like you said, it's depth, but in certain situations, if things were gelling a little better, Betcher could have been our number one striker. He was for a little while with how things were going. Mm-hmm. So, quality player. Perhaps it's not showing his quality right this second, but I'm so glad that we've signed him up and we have him for a while here. And the hometown connection with him going to SLU, that's just something that St. Louis loves, myself included. So.
Absolutely. Betcher was one of our best goal scorers per 90 last season as well. At the end of last season, I think he was the best. So he just needs to get back into form, and I think we'll see that quality return.
He needs the ball in a good spot.
Needs the ball.
Great. Let's talk about the other one. This one was a little more, well, it wasn't more recent, but it was just, this one got a lot of action on Blue Sky and X. A lot of guys talking him up. A lot of arguing about all the stats and where he should go. And I think we're going to dig into that. Not a ton on this part of the show. If you're listening on the Big 550 KTRS, please do check out our podcast, because we kind of let loose and go crazy with whatever we want to talk about at the end on the wind down. And that's only in our podcast version. And we're going to do that especially today with this signing. But Matt, why don't you talk us about Jandé Silva? Is that about right?
Jandé Silva. That's how I understand it, and that's how I've heard it pronounced. It as an Arsenal fan, it reminds me of Granit Xhaka. So Jandé Silva. Sure. So that's how I can keep it straight in my head. Anyway, Jandé Silva had been playing for Atlanta United, was classified as a TAM player for him. He's 28 years old, and he's played in a host of teams around the world. He is Portuguese, and St. Louis acquired him for a guaranteed $100,000 in 2025 GAM and up to $150,000 in 2026 GAM. Now, his designation for Atlanta United was complicated, to say the least. So there are some MLS mechanisms at play here all over the board in when he comes to St. Louis. First and foremost, he was a TAM level player for Atlanta United because of his transfer fee. He was on loan with Atlanta United up until just after the 2023 season in December, when he was bought officially for a reported 3.5 million euros. And when Atlanta bought him, they tagged him as a special discovery player. Special discovery player means it's complicated in what the actual rules say, but at the end of the day, all special discovery tag means is that Atlanta United decided to amortize his transfer fee over the life of the contract. You're allowed one player on a club's roster to do this, amortize the total amount of the acquisition costs over the term of the player's contract, including the option years if they want. So Atlanta United did this. And so they did not pay the transfer fee up front. They were able to pay it in installments, basically, to Silva's former team. Now, when St. Louis acquires him, what happens is Atlanta retains that special discovery tag, meaning St. Louis retains Silva's full 2025 prorated salary budget charge, which his salary per year is $604,000, which puts him potentially at the 9th highest paid city player. But on the transfer fee, Atlanta is stuck with that because they retain this special discovery tag. So Atlanta will continue paying. And my understanding is there's still around $1.9 million of his amortized transfer fee left to pay off. This speculated by our friends down at Scarves and Spikes, the Atlanta United coverage. And honestly, that in and of itself, the amount Atlanta has left to pay on Silva is more than Edu Leuven's original transfer fee and second only to Klaus in the overall transfer fee paid by St. Louis. 3.5 million euros is more than what we paid for Klaus in 2022. So if you're talking about trying to figure out, should we be excited about Jandé Silva before you even talk about where he slots in on the field, I think you have to back up and say, what did Atlanta see in him when he came on board and they were willing to pick up this option? Because we just talked about picking up Simon Betcher's option for 220,000 euros. Atlanta picked up Silva's option for 3.5 million euros reportedly. That's a lot of promise. And that kind of blows the top off of what St. Louis has been willing to spend. And it really puts into perspective just how value added this could potentially be for St. Louis. Now, Silva's had a little bit of a journey since being signed to Atlanta. You know, he hasn't scored a goal in 2025, first of all, but I would say Atlanta has themselves some issues going on, not just with their locker room, with their coaching staff, with transitions since Silva has been brought in. We're going to go deeper into that in the wind down, like you said, but I want to get these numbers out because it's a lot of promise based on what Atlanta saw for him and how we were able to get him. He is not going to be a TAM level player for us as a result. His salary, and we're on the hook for a prorated version of that, however much is left in the 2025 season. I don't know, it's 500,000, something like that. So he's an expensive player, non-TAM, non-designated player for St. Louis in comparison to who else is on our roster. He also takes up an international slot. We had one open, thankfully, so we don't have to worry about that. But Jandé Silva is under contract until the end of 2025 with an option for 26. So it was kind of worded a little interesting when they put it out, the push notification City did in the app, saying he was here through 2025, made it seem like it could be a loan from Atlanta. No, full acquisition. He's rostered to City, but his contract, we absorb what it was. And then it's going through 2025 with an option for 26. Gives us really high upside, monetarily speaking, and in potential talent with fairly low risk, all things considered.
Makes me think a lot about the fact that Atlanta United around this time brought Garth Lagerwey over to be their general manager from Seattle. This is a bit of a head scratcher as far as what they paid for him. And honestly, when you look at his statistics throughout his entire career, a lot of his best work was done in lower level teams. And so when you look at his performance, again, this is just the too long didn't read, but the long version will be later. It's not stunning when you look at his performance stats, his production. But if you start looking at the underlying stats, you start seeing what St. Louis could definitely use in him. And I'm looking forward to dipping into that quite a bit in the wind down today. Matt, anything else you want to talk about with Jande before we move on?
Well, if you're looking for what kind of players he stacks up to, I mean, FB Ref, I like their comparable players, and they're usually spot on in some way. Johnny Russell is the number one comparison that they use to the type of player he is, both positionally and statistically speaking. You know, he's got some really high percentile stats in total shots. So he will take shots, and we'll talk about a little bit of nuance to that in the wind down. Pass completion percentage, progressive passes receiving. So he receives a lot of passes from really advanced areas. So he puts himself in good position. On Soccer Wise podcast, David Goss called him a back post finisher and said that St. Louis doesn't have many of those players who invert and want to be in those wide areas in the final third. He called most of our guys zone 14 guys. And for those on the stream, you can take a quick gander at the video. Zone 14 is that central third area right in front of the 18-yard box. So this is David Goss referring to St. Louis having all these players that want to be in this area. Klaus, Toyshirt, Betcher, Salio to an extent, but Salio lives in 13 and 16, namely out wide left. We need some of those other guys who want to live in zones 15, 18, 13, and 16. The two wide areas, left and right, when you start to get into that final third of the field. You know, the numbers that I named are the final third wide areas, left and right. And that's a lot of promise, I think, that Silva brings in a different dimension, similar to Salio that we'll get into maybe in the wind down, but a lot of differences from our other forwards and our other, definitely our other wide players. He's not a wing back, though. I do want to say that. I don't think, as you're putting your projections, where will he start in, I understand that he is not projected to be a wing back. So he's looked to as an attacker, not as an attacking minded wing back. Rasmus Alm comparisons have been put out there, and I don't know if that's too far off, but you know, we have a lot of people don't remember what Rasmus Alm was like when we saw him. I think that I don't know if he'll start. We might talk about that in our starting 11, but he's in form. You know, he's coming from Atlanta. He didn't play this past week. Atlanta seemed like they were holding off, trying to make a deal, but he's in form. You know, he's just as far into the season as St. Louis. He hasn't had an injury issue this season. So there's no reason to think that he shouldn't slot in some capacity, as long as he has maybe a day of training. So Friday training could be pretty indicative of what to expect for Silva.
I think the Alm comps are very apt. That was one of the very first things I thought, because it was what I was thinking about. I did call it a failed signing, but Opoku never made it to St. Louis. From Nuremberg, I think. No, that's not right. Kaiserslautern. And, you know, this seems like a similar player. And I feel like both those guys, I was like, hey, Alm needs someone to be a body to fill in when Alm's not healthy. And so, you know, we are going to dig into position possibilities later, but, you know, Alm was used like it's weird because the way that St. Louis has been playing, maybe until this last game, not a lot of wide players, honestly. A lot of people in the middle and then two wingbacks. But wingbacks is a bit of a problem with health right now. So are they going to mix things up? I'm excited to see where they put him, because Alm was playing either, it seemed like, as a striker or a 10 early on in the season. And of course, Silva could do that. Either way, I also hope he brings speed, because I think speed is something we've been missing without Alm. Even though it does exist in some ways, but speed out wide just works in MLS, in my opinion. So that's something I would like to see from him as well.
Yeah. And one last thing is, Silva has played throughout Europe. I mentioned he came to Atlanta from Dijon, from Ligue 2, rather. But he's also played for Nottingham Forest. He's played for West Ham, Vitoria in the Premier Liga. I mean, he's played at some legitimate clubs that folks know of. And so his transfer into Atlanta came from Ligue 2, where he had just played 32 matches, started 25, and had 9 goal contributions, 6 goals, 3 assists in that. So this is a player who came in and kind of started strong. You know, on Soccer Wise, they likened his start with Atlanta to how Betcher, Hartl, and Toyshirt started in St. Louis. So you recapture that, you put him in a new environment. I mean, a lot of things can change when you do that for a player.
Yep. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you for joining us. That's it for now, talking about the new signings, the official signings, fully onto the full St. Louis City roster. Now we're going to start talking a little bit about the game against LAFC. Of course, we're going to zoom out, give you that bird's eye view of the two teams, just giving you general details about what the teams are like right now as they stand before we dig in deep a little bit later. So, Matt, why don't you lead us into that, please?
Yeah, Phil, you remember when we played Seattle, we made it a big point to say this was the first time we had beaten the Sounders, first time we'd even taken a point from the Sounders when we beat them 1-0.
Yes.
This is very similar in nature. Head to head, LAFC and St. Louis have played 4 matches, and St. Louis is 0-3-1, as MLS refers to the wins, losses, and draws. 3 losses and 1 draw, a combined -6 goal differential in 4 matches, and we've never actually scored against LAFC. I don't know if anybody really remembers that from the past 2 years with all the games we've had, but we've never scored against this team. Both matches in 2024 were losses, and our best result was back in September 20th of 2023 with a 0-0 draw. This is a team that has continually stymied St. Louis, and St. Louis is not going into this matchup in good form at all. We have positive outings these past few matches, but when you talk about points, when you talk about building off of goals scored, it's not there. We're still in 12th place in the West, 2 wins, 4 losses, 3 draws, 5 goals scored, 6 goals against, a -1 goal differential after that 0-0 draw at home last week to Vancouver, a 2-1 loss at home to the Crew before that, and then we know the 3 losses before that. Trends for St. Louis, we shored up the defense last week. At least there's that. In the past couple of games, arguably, have been better than expected defensive performances against the 2 best teams in MLS in the respective conferences. Versus Columbus, we had 1 individual mistake, 1 bad turnover recovery. Otherwise, it was a stellar game defensively against a team that is really good on the ball, not unlike what LAFC, the quality at least, if not the exact type of play. We still can't finish, though. This 0-0 draw against Vancouver it's not like we didn't have opportunities. So that's been a consistent narrative that St. Louis is having to live with at this point. And we've got some stats to talk about in a little bit that really show why that finishing is the key more so than chances created. But we've had better ball movement. We've had high pressing in the last couple of games, at least a willingness to do that, a willingness to get beyond a low block and a mid block and at least attempt to high press teams a little bit more in a brave manner. And so they fall back at times still. St. Louis is there's a pragmatism to our defense in these past few games, but we're at least willing to put players high, get 5, 6, even 7 defenders north of the midline in order to try and press. But at the end of the day, St. Louis needs to start creating these turnovers higher up the field, because that's the one thing that's really eluding us, is being effective in our high press that's causing us to drop back into a mid and low block. And it's all a cascade effect. The trends in our lack of chance creation, the trends in our lack of finishing, getting bodies into the final third, it all starts on the defense when you're a team that possesses the ball like 32% of the time. If you're not going to play on the ball and you're not able to get that working, this St. Louis team has been struggling with building the ball out of the back so far up the field in order to create a numbers advantage. Now, health and availability for St. Louis is trending better, but it's, there are no straight lines to health for St. Louis, obviously. And Thomas Totland is probably the biggest example of no straight lines to health. Totland has a hamstring injury, will likely be questionable at best, given his lack of training early in the week. I talked about this in our midweek pod, but he appeared to have a setback during warmups in the second half of last week, where anybody who might have noticed the team warming up in the second half, during and after the 2 subs were made, Totland went down and he was the only player sitting on the bench with, who was it subbed out? Cedric Toysher and Celio Pompeu. That's not a great sign. Totland's regression in training on Tuesday was not a great sign. He trained to the side on individual drills. He did not train with the team in full on Tuesday. So watch out for the update on Totland on Friday. That's going to be important to tell us, is he training with the team, and will he even possibly be available for Sunday's match? Because it is Sunday night soccer, so there is an extra day of trying to get players right. Totland's going to be questionable in my eyes. Guys that aren't going to be questionable, though, Henry Kessler, grade 2 hamstring. Roman Berkey still out with a fractured hand. Edu Leuven still not at training, non-injury. We've talked about that. Chris Durkin with an MCL, though Chris Durkin was running solo at training on Tuesday, which was a really pleasant surprise to see. Jay Reed with his foot, Rasmus Alm with his hip. All those guys are going to be out. Now, Roman Berkey, it's possible that he might return for next week's match, but he's going to miss LAFC. He hasn't yet started goalkeeping and training, but Olaf seemed a little bit cautiously optimistic in Berkey's potential return if he's cleared next week. And the fact that he's running and taking part in team drills, I talked on our midweek show about how there were 2 small team drills, one with the starters, one with the reserves. Berkey was training in full with the reserves in those rondo type scenarios. So that's good to see, keeping his fitness up, doing what he can without his hand. Jay Reed was doing individual drills on Tuesday in his progression from foot surgery. Rasmus Alm was not training outdoors, but he was walking around at least in shoes this time, where it was last week it was sandals. And so if you're talking a progression for Alm, it's something. But then Leuven and Kessler entirely absent that we saw. Other notables that we had been tracking, Jonas Horn and Joachim Nilsson trained in full, no restrictions. So they had, Horn was off the injury list last week. Nilsson carried a questionable tag, but it seems like both of them are going to carry full bills of health into this weekend, Sunday night matchup, as long as no setbacks occur. So if you're putting out your starting 11s, Horn, maybe Nilsson could be an option, but that's good news at least. And then on the LAFC side, LAFC comes into this match 7th in the West. They haven't been a powerhouse team to start this season. They're 4-4-1 with 13 goals scored, 14 goals against, and a -1 goal differential. 3-1-0 at home. They've got 3 wins and a draw, 3 wins and a loss rather at home. Now, their last week's match against Portland Timbers, if you haven't watched the highlights of this one, go back and watch it because this was a crazy match. They conceded a goal at 8 minutes. They almost had a goal in the first 2 minutes, but it was called offsides, Denny Bwanga. But they were able to come back from down 2 or 3-0 to tie this game. And it was a pretty incredible back and forth. And it also cost them their head coach, as I'll tell in just a minute. But before that, they had a 2-1 win at home against San Diego. It was then before that, 2 losses, first against Houston, and then before that, San Diego. So this team is up and down. They're not carrying much of they're carrying momentum from their goal scoring, but they're not carrying a multi-match win streak type of a thing. Now, some of the trends for LAFC in this, they've had fixture congestion through mid-April, but it hasn't been an issue lately because they were knocked out of Champions Cup by Inter Miami before Miami moved on to play Vancouver, who they're playing right now as we record this. In MLS play, they started the season with 2 clean sheets, but they haven't had one since March 22nd at Sporting KC. They've got 3 total clean sheets, so we have more clean sheets than they do on the season. In MLS play also, they hadn't had a match with more than 2 goals scored until last weekend's 3 goals against Portland. A lot of their matches are 1-0, 2-1, and at home, their goal differential in 4 games is just +2. In all matches, they've had 1 goal differential. So they're tight games. They're played kind of on that razor's edge where they're able to hold leads, but they're not running away with things, for instance. And the last thing that's interesting is that they haven't been an early goal scoring team lately. They had their chances against Portland. They scored, but it was offside, so nothing counted. They don't have any first half goals in their last 3 matches. They have 2 goals after 42 against San Diego about 4 matches ago. But this team has struggled in scoring early. So looking for opportunity for St. Louis, there you go. They are a healthy team. Maxime Chanot and Lorenzo De Valle are the only 2 injuries that they carried last week. And by all accounts, they haven't had any injuries picked up this week. Neither of those 2 are really big factors. They're both center backs and more depth pieces. So they've got a healthy team welcoming us. They just got back Jeremy Abobasi, for instance, we'll talk about in a little bit. So attacking help is there. And some of the biggest storylines I'm following before we talk about this, Phil, Steve Cherundolo has been all over the news in the past week and a half. Most recently, he's been in the news because he's going to be suspended for this match because of a red card that he picked up following, I believe, Olivier Giroud's goal last week against Portland. So this is actually going to be the second time we face a team without their primary manager on the sidelines. Brian Schmetzer against Seattle had an illness and didn't travel. So we might be, I don't know, there's a stat there that I'm kind of curious on that I don't have, but what's the most number of matches a team has played where their opposition hasn't carried their official manager in? Because we're up to 20% after this game. But the other thing that Steve Cherundolo made news for is that he's stepping down after this season. This is a big story in not just MLS, but in global soccer, because you're going to start having speculation about why and where Steve Cherundolo is going. But after 4 seasons in charge of LAFC, and I think 3 total cups between MLS and Open Cup, I want to say, he's leaving on his own accord, and it's shocked everyone. It shocked everyone. It shocked the league to the extent where they didn't even have websites for his goodbye message up. They had to say, stand by, wait for more information. This was a move that he obviously wanted to get out in front of, made a decision. He said, quote, after much reflection and discussion with my family, we made the decision that at the end of this year, we will return to Germany. Talks about his love for the city and the team, but this was a surprise move. And it's kind of, it gives LAFC time and a runway to, get their bearings for a new manager, but it is going to be interesting to see if the team rallies around Steve Cherundolo a little bit more. And I think it was David Goss on SoccerWise who almost credited them with, is this going to be a new manager bounce? Because they're wanting to rally around Steve Cherundolo on his way out. That's a huge story on the sidelines. On the field, you've got a couple stories to follow here. Olivier Giroud scored his first MLS goal after being in the league since last summer. And they just signed Frankie Amaya on loan from Toluca. This is a pretty big signing, and it's going to be a pretty big question if he goes into the team and he's able to host St. Louis, if he's able to play and feature. A lot of promise for Frankie Amaya. I'm sure you could go into more on that, Phil, but LAFC having their best game of the year last weekend. They had 61% possession, 2.7 expected goals, which is, God, wouldn't we love to see a 2.7 expected goals for St. Louis? 19 shots, 9 on target. This is a team that at least is in rounding into their attacking form. They just signed Frankie Amaya on loan. Steve Cherundolo is trying to rally the troops on his way out. I'm worried that we're catching LAFC at the wrong time here.
Yeah. I think when we had some luck with that, and maybe it's coming back around here. But just quickly on Frankie Amaya, I think he's like a central midfielder that has shown a lot of promise. He's bounced around a little bit because I think he has big eyes for big things to happen. And I think he works hard for it. So I think this is a good move. I'm trying to find out. Yeah, he's only got 2 starts for Toluca since 2020, since last season. They have a different format of seasons in Mexico, but only 360 minutes. So he will have the legs. Will he be in form? I don't know, but he has 2 assists in 2 starts in 360 minutes. So if he's doing that in Liga MX, that means he's got some quality. That's not just some random kid who had no playing time that's coming up to LAFC. This is reinforcements for sure. So something to watch for. But LAFC, I know we're about to get into like what they're going to be like, but Steve Cherundolo has done such a good job with them. I know he's got a great lineup, but they've had to move around pieces to kind of stay good, and it's hard to do that when things have changed so much. To be able to have a Giroud who's not performing and still win, could St. Louis have done that? Are we doing it right now? Those are the kind of things you think of. And so it's interesting to see him have so much success, have USMNT rumors, looking at all the success and the style of play that LAFC has had, looking at what Pochettino has done with USMNT. Like, would a practical defensive-minded team that is really good in transition be something that would be really good for USMNT right now? I don't know. I think we needed a culture change, shake-up as well, and Cherundolo might not have brought that. But it is something I've thought about looking at all the success here. So, best of luck to him. We can especially say that because we're not facing him this weekend. But, of course, as an American, we're rooting for this guy. I hope he goes to Germany and does some coaching over there and makes us proud.
We'll get him one more time this year, so we can wax poetic now because we won't be doing that
exactly
next time. I like it.
Well, I think we should move on if that's all right, Matt. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. Now we are going to dig deeper into LAFC, the kind of style that they play, what we can look for, things we can confirm as we see them. Check mark. These guys are this. St. Louis should be looking like this. Matt, help us out. What should we be looking for this weekend?
If they get a lead, they're going to hold a lead. LAFC has been really good at holding their leads. They've been good at coming back from losing position. So this is a team that's never out of it. You can't score early and rest on your laurels because they're always looking to poach. It's not just Denny Bwanga, though. Denny Bwanga is the most dangerous player on their team by far. He is that singular player that can change a game, and he's the person that they play through. play in and play out. They love to shoot from direct free kicks, so they will look to earn fouls. They will look to earn corner kicks, and they will look to have value with their set pieces. Their long shot opportunities are something that kind of goes unnoticed because they do so well at getting the ball into these dangerous areas. But they had a few shots on Portland, and I saw the San Diego game where they get the ball, whether it's on a rebound or a pass to the back post, just outside the box, and they're willing to send it on goal. And they have a little bit more quality than St. Louis is used to seeing for us. Picture what Chris Durkin usually does for those shots, but picture them going on target. That's what LAFC does in these long shot opportunities. But they themselves do have weaknesses. You know, a 4-4-1 record, they're not without issues this season. They're still trying to find themselves in a lot of ways, and they are weak against set pieces. They allow fouls, or they give fouls, and they allow the ball to be in set pieces in dangerous areas. And they can be taken advantage of in this way. So what Edu Leuven was able to do, because we drew a foul in the Seattle Sounders game, that's the way we can kind of try to tip the balance into our favor here, no matter what happens in the run of play, because LAFC doesn't do a good job of avoiding fouling in those dangerous areas. And they are not great at defending against these skillful players. So if you get a good quality player with the ball at his feet, able to kind of, do a little 1v1 work, Celio Pompeu, for instance, they're kind of weak on that because of the way they set up their back line. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but their style looks to attack down the left. They love to engage Denny Bouanga down that left side. They love to take those long shots, but they have these short passes. They are top 5 in MLS in medium passes attempted, top 10 in short passes, and middle of the league in long. The medium passes are like 15 to 30. They're also 7th in the MLS in passing completion percentage. So similar to what we saw with the Columbus Crew and Vancouver Whitecaps, they are very efficient in their passing. They do not put the ball into dangerous areas, and they're good at connecting their passes. And when you're good at connecting those 15 to 30-yard passes, that's how you can break a press. That's how you can break lines, and you can really be dangerous in progressing your ball. They also are deep. This is a team that does rotate a lot. With CONCACAF Champions Cup, and just LAFC in general, they've built a really deep roster, and they don't have injury issues right now. Yeah, they've sold a bunch of guys, Mateus Bogus, for instance. They long left Carlos Vela. Those guys, they weren't required for LAFC to be successful because LAFC is so deep. They've replaced them with guys like Jeremy Abobasi. And we just talked about Frankie Amaya. Olivier Giroud has been there since last summer. So there's no shortage of quality players that they can rotate with. And Jeremy Abobasi hasn't even been starting because he's been hurt the past few games. And so they've got him coming back. They are not as aggressive of a team when they have the ball. I would say they pick their opportunities, though they do like to press. They're one of the better, more, I would say, efficient pressing teams in the league. And they do so with a front three that presses in tandem. But their opponents do play aggressively against them. So they are on their heels a fair amount in transition. And that's kind of how some of these goals have been scored on them. So that bodes well for a St. Louis team that, like I said at the beginning, possesses around 35% of the time on average, and looks to hit on the counter, looks to hit in transition, trying to work the ball through the middle of the field. And once you're in the final third, make just one pass to goal. That's the kind of way that if you properly spread out the LAFC defense, you can put yourself in good quality opportunities to get those high XG shots on target. Now, LAFC, when you think of LAFC versus St. Louis, you probably think Denny Bouanga, obviously, because he has hammered St. Louis in the past. I think every single goal scored against St. Louis in 2024 by LAFC was a Denny Bouanga goal. I want to say there's 3 total goals in 2 matches. But this version of LAFC, they haven't been this volume hawk when it comes to goals or shots even. In fact, LAFC actually only has 0.7 more non-penalty expected goals than St. Louis on the year, and 0.9 more expected assists. So this is a team that they're not putting themselves in continuously good spots to have these high quality non-penalty expected goals, meaning just goals in the run of play, set pieces, corner kicks, those kinds of things. But it's kind of surprising in both ways how close these teams really are in those non-penalty expected goals and expected assists, meaning they're giving the same number of passes that lead into those shots. So that's fascinating to me. They only average 0.44 more shots per 90 than St. Louis, and 0.89 more shots on target per 90. These really close teams, like less than half more shots per 90 than St. Louis, and less than 1 more shot on target per 90 than St. Louis, but they double up St. Louis's goals per shot and goals per shots on target. We could wax poetic about expected goals all day, and I love to do that during the week, but when you get down to the game, those are just the shots that make you go, ah, and you want to see the goals because you want to cheer for them. And you get those with LAFC at a far greater rate than you do with St. Louis. LAFC is so much more efficient in finishing their chances than St. Louis, and that's probably the biggest difference between these clubs outside of the possession, outside of the way they pass. That's the singular difference. They're more efficient in their finishing because they are not creating more chances than St. Louis in general. On the personnel front, I mentioned Jeremy Abobasi, recently returned from a leg injury, so their attacking depth is there. It's bolstered a little bit, but there's still one person that makes a difference, and I've talked about him a few times. Denny Bouanga is the difference maker. He scored 3 of the overall 6 goals in all 4 games between these two clubs. I mentioned he scored all 3 goals last year. He's excelled not only in every game that he's played against St. Louis, but this is like a perennial golden boot contender. He has the speed, the acceleration, the willingness to press, and he dispossesses defenders playing the balls out of the back. He's good on both sides of the ball. He's elite on both sides of the ball for LAFC. This is a player that is, I would say, the golden goose that makes everything work is Denny Bouanga. It's not just his finishing. It's not just his pressing. He's got a willingness to create for others as well. And I believe he's either leading their team in expected assists or assists, which is just a fantastic marker for a player that, like Denny Bouanga, who you would think of as wanting to feed the ball to, wanting to put the shot on target. You know, he's a guy who buys into the Ted Lasso, make that final pass type scenario, and he can do it all. It's not just LAFC in feeding one player, though, because this team off the ball, they actually like to press quite a bit. When they do, like I mentioned, they use all 3 of their front men. So you're having a St. Louis team that's going to try and play the ball out of the back a few different ways. You're going to have bent loop goal kicks. You're going to have playing wide to a Marcel Hartl or a Conrad Wallem like we saw in the second half of last game. Or you're going to play it over to a Timo Baumgartel and have him try and progress the ball. LAFC will pressure our back line. They're going to pressure with all 3 of their attackers because they run in a 4-3-3 formation. And when they do, it creates numbers advantages when they're successful. So it creates easier opportunities when they turn the ball over successfully from that back line in the defensive midfield. They've already got 3, 4, 5 guys ready to pass the ball, ready to progress it quickly and play through that defense. But when the ball is played through their front line, they're pretty willing to drop back into even a semblance of a 5-4-1, where at times they look to clog up that midfield. They look to do what they can to limit the ball even entering their defensive third, and they block the wide areas. This is going to be a battle point between both teams, is that when LAFC drops back and St. Louis actually has the ball trying to progress through the middle third, how's LAFC going to attack that? Because they've shown this season that they want to attack on the wings, and that's where St. Louis desperately tries to move the ball through. And so you're going to see wing battles. This is why, to me, it's going to be a really tricky story if you're Olaf Melberg on where to start Kyle Hebert. And I say where because Kyle Hebert is an Olaf Melberg guy. Kyle Hebert has started all 9 games for St. Louis City so far, as hard to believe as that might be for you. The question to me isn't where will Hebert start, it's where will Hebert start. And if you start Hebert on the wing against this kind of an LAFC team, I think you're basically just giving up one of those sides. You're giving up one of the more dangerous areas, because if you have Kyle Hebert on the right side, that's the Denny Bouanga side. That's the left side that they love to move the ball through. And I think that's going to be one of the trickier things for St. Louis. Last thing I'll say really, Phil, on LAFC is they run a 4-man back line, but they don't operate in a defensive-minded 4-man back line. They'll move their center backs, Aaron Long and Marlon, the Brazilian Marlon. They move them kind of wide, and they allow their fullbacks to split wide and high. And they drop their number 6, Igor Jesus, back to be kind of a central center back of sorts, to provide a little coverage. But it gives that's how they get their width, is they move both of their fullbacks higher up on the field. They spread their center backs out, giving the numerical advantage in the midfield areas. And that's a worry for a team like St. Louis that has struggled in providing a lot of, or protecting against open space in the midfield.
Yep. But it could, it just depends on how they work it. It's going down that left side. That could be a good thing as well. I think what stood out to me in all the things you said there, Matt, though, was how much the statistics, at least the ones you listed, matched up with St. Louis. But how the results are just so much different. And, I can't help but think about, is that just a money spend thing? Because that's it works, right? That
Well,
definitely improves things in this league and more in other leagues. But still, like, it makes a big difference.
it does.
They've been at it a little bit longer as far as they figured out their style and stuck to it for a long time and moved like for like players in and out of the system. And I think Cherundolo has done a good job adjusting quickly. There weren't a lot of slumps in their seasons. It was pretty steady, and they would make up for any slumps there were. So, it does feel like a bit of a dagger in our side looking at, the team is performing, but they're getting the results. I just, it's a little disappointing with St. Louis because I hope that means maybe there is, a bright, thing, something good around the corner, because maybe they're on the right track, but also maybe, not. It could go either way. But I'm really glad that you posted, brought out those numbers being so close together, even though the results are pretty different. That's really interesting.
Well, the one thing I think we also have to hang our head on too is this is a team that's been playing up to their competition in St. Louis and has been getting progressively more comfortable and better in creating chances. Our actual creation of expected goals and creation of shot opportunities has steadily grown as the season has progressed. There was that massive game against the LA Galaxy, but that was basically it. And in comparison, you view that as kind of an aberration at this point. But these past few games, Columbus, Vancouver, they've shown that we can go toe to toe against the best. And so you do take a lot of these stats with a grain of salt in that regard, because anything can happen when you're on the field. But without using that as the easy out, we do have a good track record at this point of playing up to our opponents. Philadelphia was, I want to say, first in the league when we played them. They might have been undefeated at the time when we played them, and we played them strong, even with their rotated lineup. That at the time was one of the best teams in MLS. Vancouver, Columbus, now LAFC. We beat the Seattle Sounders. We have been playing good. Well, let me backtrack that. We have been playing all right and getting better against better quality teams. So there's no reason to just say LAFC, yeah, they've got the pedigree, they've got the track record historically. They're a powerhouse that we can't beat. You've got his history against you in the sense of you haven't even scored a goal against them. But at the same time, you have a team that does seem to be coalescing around an ability to get better in the attack. And they've got the defense figured out.
I agree. And I think I said that a lot, I think either last week or 2 weeks ago, that every week things seem to be figured out. Little tiny things are being figured out. And I guess I got to remember this is our third coach in that many seasons. So it's just a lot to make up. There hasn't been consistency like LAFC has had from the very beginning. So I guess I got to remember that this is a start over. Unfortunately, Mellberg wasn't able to come in and take the roster and run, which maybe some people could, maybe some people couldn't. But the injuries, I know it's all part of it. I wish we could have maybe hit the ground running a little bit more, but it's definitely a catch up scenario. And we are seeing improvement. I'm trying to hang my head on the improvement.
Yes, I agree with that. But the one thing I'll push back on with that is I do have a problem with the fact that we had our players gelling so well at the end of last season, and we talked all off season about wanting to pick up that steam and just hit the ground running because of all the players we picked up in the last summer transfer window. The reason that I keep coming back to that we haven't done that, and I'm going to agree with Taylor Twellman from this past week, is it seems like it's the head coach. And that's not a knock necessarily on the head coach, because he's doing what he came in wanting to do. I think it's a knock on the expectation that we had that this would be City 2.0 from the beginning, and just an evolution, getting better on the ball, but still having those same qualities, the same transition, the same formations that even enabled you to do what we were doing at the end of last season. And we brought it back more to square one. And now that we're here, we're kind of stuck, right? We're building off of what Olaf started with in the preseason, and we have to ride that out. We cannot go back to the way it was, because we're not going to go back to the way it was under Olaf. and you can't just keep bringing in coach after coach if you have a bad 10-game stretch or an underwhelming 10-game stretch. You have to ride it out at this point. And you are seeing more positives than negatives in the past few games. You're waiting for that waterfall to really hit where the goals just start dropping in mass. But while you're having such good defensive performances, it's almost buying yourself some time. But that time is wearing thin on the fan base because they want to see more goals. 5 goals in 9 games isn't going to cut it. You can't, that's not a sustainable pace. As good as the defense has been, minus those couple instances, as good as the defense has been overall, you have to start shifting the landscape a little bit. You have to start having that tipping point of creating more chances while remaining.
Okay, well, I think we're all out of time. I think we're just going to do a lineup today because this is it for the show on the Big 550 KTRS. We'll give you this lineup very quickly, and we're out of here. But please do check us out on the podcast. What you're hearing, this conversation would go on for at least 15 minutes or more, and this is the style of conversation we would have in the wind down. So check it out if that sounds interesting to you. Matt, what is your lineup? And I'll give mine.
Ben Lunt. My back line, I'm going to go Giannis Horn, Timo Baumgartel, and Josh Yarrow. Conrad Wallem, Marcel Hartl. You know what? I'm going to back up. I'm going to go Kyle Hebert instead of Josh Yarrow. We're going to do Horn, Baumgartel, Hebert, Wallem at left wing back, Hartl and Morales at our center mids, and then Akil Watts at our right wing back, and then Salio, Klaus, and Toyshirt. So really, it's plugging in Giannis Horn, keeping Kyle Hebert as a center back, and not a fullback like I was talking about earlier, and then keeping Akil Watts.
That's what I want. But you know, if Watts is looking scary there on the right wing against Bouanga, which is fair, if it happens, we can't go crazy. You know, just prepare Hebert to be right there, ready to hit Bouanga, and tell Watts he's got to sprint back and do his dirty work as a defender, as a wing back. And if it doesn't go well, he's out. And then maybe we throw Yarrow and Hebert in there, unless we're playing catch up. It just depends on how the game goes. But those are the 2 ways this could go. Is if Bouanga scores, then we got to just double down on catching up on a goal. But if it's scary with Watts at wing back and they haven't scored, maybe you shore it up a little bit. Score really fast, Matt, and we're out of here.
I've got it a 1-1 draw, and it's noteworthy to me that Vegas has St. Louis as the biggest underdog of all the teams in the league this week. That's huge to me, but I think we have a 1-1 draw.
3-1 loss for St. Louis. So there you go. Ooh. That's it from us. Thank you for listening so much. We will talk to you soon. Enjoy the game if you can, guys, watching that late one on LAFC. Is that right? Is it a late game, Matt?
Sunday night soccer.
Okay. Sunday night soccer. So I forgot it's the special Sunday game. All right. Enjoy the game, guys. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later. Oh, we went so long, dude.
So long.
I was trying to hurry you up.
I know. Well, we'll let them edit it. If you're just joining us, like Derek Smith said, he's just joining us on YouTube. We have a full wind down to talk about transfer windows, Johnny Silva, Taylor Twellman's comments, etc. Blues are up 3-0. I'm hearing. Yep, 3-0. That's right. Holy cow! First period, 3-0. We'll be right back. Grab a drink and let's enjoy the evening. My audio's out of sync. Well, that's not good. Is that the case? Is my audio still out of sync? If somebody can let me know, that would be fantastic while we're waiting for Phil to get back here. Twellman told me the Forever Red kits are gorgeous. I mean, what were you expecting from the guy who was emceeing the event of the the reveal, or not the reveal, but the what was the city party? I can't even remember the name of it. Not the city block party, but the city kickoff. Phil, I'm hearing my audio is out of sync a little bit.
It's been
How
fine.
is it on you?
Does that mean? Well, luckily I record off of my audio, so it'll be fine.
Okay, I'm gonna leave and come right back then.
So are we talking like at the same time by the time the delay happens? I wonder.
I hope not. I'm glad you're gonna post this one then. But yeah, let me leave and
Thanks, Tom. That's helpful.
okay, let's try this again.
Chat.
Oh man, we probably were talking all over each other.
Probably.
You're gonna have to double check. I don't think there's any editing on that part, but double check that my audio is not messed up when I talk over you. All right, I'm ready to go.
Okay, here we go. Welcome everyone to the wind down. Getting heavier now, Matt. I see.
It's gonna be a good night.
Heavier drink is what I meant, actually.
Well, a bigger drink.
Oh, okay.
Still sticking with the urban chestnut motif, but this time we upgraded to upgraded in size to a Zwickel, which is my go-to kind of. It's like the drink that tastes the best after you mow the lawn or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which you did tonight and broke your lawnmower.
I broke my lawnmower. This was the most outrageous thing in the world. It's like an electric mower, and it had worked fine for the past like 3 or 4 years. But the thing that broke was the handle. Like that, I was turning it to go to a different row, and all of a sudden not the plastic, but like that metal part that connects the handle to the mower itself, it literally broke in two. And so this has been just. It was a good week, and then it was just, what in the world is happening today? Anyway.
Well, what do you want to start with, Matt? Should we continue our conversation like on the 12-man stuff, on like the team itself? It seems, I think we should. I know you put it last, but like it seems to be where everyone's mind is right now.
Okay. Yeah. We'll circle back to Jandé Silva in a little bit because we have some more in-depth things to talk about when it comes to Jandé Silva and the overall targets that St. Louis was looking at for the transfer window. But the transfer window is done and dusted. We've signed one player. We made official the loan of another, or we picked up the purchase option of another. But there were two notable, there's a lot of media coverage. There's two notable comments I think made this week, from one by Taylor Twellman on 101 ESPN on Tuesday, I assume. I think that's when he does his McKernan thing. And then Matt Doyle gave grades out for all MLS transfer windows. And I mentioned the Soccer-Wise thing on the main part. But there were grades that they gave out, and that's not going to surprise you at all. So I might just get Doyle's out of the way because in the Western Conference grades, Matt Doyle gave St. Louis City SC a C- when it comes to this transfer window. Talks about, it's not hard to knock the window on a personnel front because you got Conrad Wallem, you have Timo Baumgartel, Alfredo Morales, and now Jandé Silva. Like that was our haul in this transfer window. This is a long transfer window. It went from, December of us announcing Timo Baumgartel, the announcements, not the actual window itself, but the announcements of it, December. And then, you're talking over a third of the year, calendar year, this transfer window has been more or less active. So don't forget, it's not just Jandé Silva. It's not just the purchase option of Simon Betcher, but Conrad Wallem, Timo Baumgartel, and Alfredo Morales all arrived in this window. And as Matt Doyle says, Alfredo Morales has been one of the more surprising acquisitions in that time, where he went from a trialist at Coachella to now being one of our more heavy minutes guys, with Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin both injured, or both out rather. So Morales in the central midfield, Timo Baumgartel's coming up strong, and Conrad Wallem's impact, I don't think anybody's going to bat an eye at what Wallem's been doing from that left wing back and right mid side. But Doyle's problem was that Lutz Pfannenstiel seems to have hired a coach in Olaf Melberg whose philosophy does not jibe with the strengths of the roster. So this picks up on that little nugget we said earlier about, you hire a coach that you want to continue the progress and build upon everything you've been doing, as opposed to somebody who's going to take you back to step one, ground zero, and build from his style that is more or less completely different. And that's kind of more akin to what we've had this year. And I think that's absolutely why we've gone to a more defensive focus, because if you haven't listened to Olaf Melberg, he's made more than one comment so far this season about the quality of the players not being up to what is needed for what he wants to do with the team. He wants to be a high pressing team, he says. He wants to be good on the ball, but he's not really willing to go for either of those in bulk because of his, as he says, the quality of the team. And so he's working to improve the quality of the team with the players that he has, working to make better guys like Marcel Hartl, make better Conrad Wallem, make better your Kyle Heberts, your Josh Yarrows on the ball. And so that's been the massive learning curve. And so you have a successful window in bringing these key players on, but you have a coach that was hired in this window essentially as well.
I wonder what he did. It was Norway where he was coaching before this, right? And
Sweden.
Was it?
You're all over the board on your upper European countries.
Yeah.
It was that the Brahma club.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter. He was able to take a team that was a low salary team. This is something we were told early on, right? And get them promoted. And then they stayed up, right? Those were success stories. And I guess I wonder if that's what he did with them, is just defended like crazy. And I wondered that early on, but like the average goals per game were like very close to 2, which isn't great, but it's definitely not bad, right? It's not like we're going to defend out, all the zero kind of stuff that we've been seeing.
Yeah.
Or 1-0, that kind of stuff. Like it seems even more conservative than what he was doing in Sweden. But I'm just curious if that's like his go-to. I also wonder, like, that whole like going 100% all the time thing didn't pay off in the United States as much as maybe it did in Sweden.
That's fair. We haven't talked about the nonstop players in a while.
Because I do feel like they go nonstop, but I think it doesn't stand out as much higher than any other MLS team. I think every MLS team kind of does that, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just something I've been musing. But yeah, I don't know. At least he's stopped just defending, right? Like
yes. He's
been pushed to do more.
Yeah, the stats back up where we engage with the ball a little bit more the past few games. Also, the number of times that we at least make an attempt on the ball in the attacking half. I can think of only one time it's really burned us, and that's the Columbus game for the second goal, when we had 7 attackers in our attacking half trying to press, and they just sliced through our midfield to create that goal. But overall, if you look at the average height of defensive actions, just comparing us to LAFC, we are overall about the same. And so if you're thinking of LAFC as more of a high pressing or better pressing team, which they are, the LAFC does press, the average height of defensive action, taking all of the defensive engagements into account, the initial defensive engagements, we're pretty similar. It's not super high. It's definitely lower than it has been in the past couple of years. And that's not arguable. Like you can't argue that we have not been high pressing, or you can't argue against that we haven't been high pressing as much as we did in year 1 and at least the first part of year 2. The numbers are just there that defensively we've been back further. But it's the question of why that really gets to me. And it's not just playing the ball out of the back, but it's just It's just saying that the quality isn't there for the way that I want to press is how I'm understanding it. And to be quite fair, I don't know what difference Olaf Melberg's high press has versus John Hackworth or Bradley Carnell. I know high press is high press where you move the players up. And the thing that Bradley Carnell always talked about with the high press is it wasn't necessarily the tip of the spear that was the most important thing. It was every other action after that. You have to act as one when you're doing this. And that's why LAFC is so dangerous when they do theirs, because they have 3 attackers up front to do this high pressing. So they have this cohesive way where if Denny Bwanga is the one who initiates it, then maybe you have Olivier Giroud or one of the other players in that same part of the field to you move on one player so you know where the outlets are going to be on the others. You can cut off the lines, you can cut off that other player. Everybody knows their responsibility. And maybe that's been part of this learning curve under Olaf is the push points that Bradley Carnell used to talk about of if Klaus is going to initiate the press, Cedric Toyshirt, Celio Pompeu, Marcel Hartl, they all have jobs to do, and they have to do them quickly if you're going to be effective. It's not just, can you, are you fast enough? It's, you have to have that awareness to be able to recognize when Klaus is pressing and what your role is in the part of the field that you're responsible for when Klaus does press. One of the things that I think we've done well in the other part of the field to this point is if we create a turnover deep in our own zone, watch video back lately in the Vancouver game, especially because if like Timo Baumgartel forces a turnover or blocks a ball, you'll see Klaus, Celio, and Toyshirt immediately turn and start running. Like they are watching for when that ball is turned over so they can make the run. It's that awareness that our midfielders and our other attackers and our wingers have to have when we're initiating our press. Otherwise, the whole thing just falls apart.
Yeah, I don't know the pressing system. I mean, I think we'd have to know what it is. And I'd really, if we could be a fly on the wall and find out what it is exactly that Melberg is asking for that the guys can't, do. I don't know. I would love to hear it, but I guess maybe we should go back to Doyle's grades. I got us off topic there. Did we cover like the things that Doyle is saying, and do we agree with them or not agree with them?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with them to the extent he doesn't put it on the players. He's actually kind of waxing poetic a bit about like Conrad Wallum, Alfredo Morales. He doesn't go deep into them, obviously, but that's the one thing that has changed, and I am willing to see what's been working lately. And so,
me too. Yeah.
To me, you have to really not just understand, but you have to acknowledge just how different Olaf is implementing things. And it's not entirely due to injuries to me. It's because you can look at our back line and say that back line had the talent there. You're rotating who it is, but we always came into the season saying we have center back depth and we have quality center back depth. I consider Josh Arrow and Kyle Hebert quality center back depth. So while you have Nielsen in and out, you have Baumgartel getting up to form, you have Horn, who had been up until his injury, like one of these stalwarts. That's why you have the center back depth, and it's been working. It's I guess some of the other positions, central midfield, I guess you can point to say has had to work through the Leuven and Durkin loss, and it's different having Morales there for 90, and it's different having Hartl drop back, and so you have to do different things. I will absolutely give him that. And that may be the biggest thing for Olaf in the growth this year. It's going from Leuven and Durkin to Morales and Hartl, because Hartl in particular does so much in that central midfield role that I've actually come to enjoy him being there. The problem I have is we need to have finishers in the final third that I know Hartl can be, and we need to better connect the lines, and we're using our wing backs to be doing that. And so you have Hartl and Wallum playing off of each other, and we're doing that better and better and better. But if you're going to have Hartl play a deeper central mid role, then you have to have those around him better at ball progression. You have to have a Klaus coming that much deeper to receive the ball. And then you have to have either a Wallum or Celio play off of him. Cedric Toyshirt, please get the ball to him somehow. But that's kind of what you have to do. You have to connect the lines by pulling players further back. And when you're doing that, you're having less touches in the final third. You're spending more time with the ball in the middle third. That's the problem that we're into with our progression right now is you're pulling players further back and back of quality, and you haven't really figured out how to connect it to the attacking third, even though you're attacking third personnel, like there's quality there. Salio, Klaus, and Teuscher. Nobody's going to argue that that's not a pretty decent, at worst, attacking trio that St. Louis can build off of. But it's just getting the ball up to them consistently and figuring out what's the best plan of action for them to play off of each other. Like Klaus as that holding center forward. If he had maybe if Cedric Teuscher was in better position to play off of him going forward, maybe this is where Jandai Silva plays into if he can move over to the right side, though he's played most of his career on the left. You know, that's something that people are talking about this week is a combination of Salio and Silva flanking Klaus. You know, is that an opportunity that Mellberg has to give a different dimension and even out both wings compared to what we're going with right now?
Yeah, and I just want to fixate on the fact that Leuven hasn't been here. And yeah, maybe Durkin being out is a big deal, but you know, Leuven is a designated, or maybe he's been bought down, but like,
yeah, he was at DP, now he's at TAM.
I mean, let's be honest, he's one of the best players on the team, and you're like, basically, you were inferring this, but like, losing Leuven means we've lost Hartle up high, and so I think that might be low key. I know we're focused on the finishing right now, and you and I talked about how that Teuscher storyline isn't quite getting as much play as it probably should, because he's definitely, I think, our best finisher in the small amount of statistics that we have on him so far at St. Louis. But, you know, having Hartle higher, I will die on that hill, I think, at this point. I'm ready to go ahead and give my life for the storyline of Hartle, or the narrative of Hartle needing to be higher up the field. And I don't think that's Mellberg's fault that he's been playing as an 8 lately. But, you know, there are things that need to continue to get better, and it has been getting better. I think we've been highlighting that. It's just it's hard to be positive. It's a slow climb up a steep hill that we never really wanted to be on, right?
No.
I think if we could choose, we would have, you know, the same coach we started with, not that it would be Carnell, but like just whoever, you know, working into our 3rd season of some success with building on the players that we have rather than getting rid of players. There have been so many problems along the way that we're paying for right now is a good way to look at that, actually.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, in the chat, Derek Smith said we're so hurt by Tottenham's injury. He's one of Berkey's favorite outlets, added width on the right side, then either Watts or Hebert come close to matching. You know, this Tottenham's massive, but also Olaf and Lutz have both acknowledged the lack of depth of that right wing back spot. So I think they're both understanding the hurt that we're in right now. And the trick right now is Tottenham is coming back. And he's right around the corner. He had a setback. We talked about it earlier, but you don't want to bring in necessarily somebody who's going to supplant Tottenham and use a roster slot on that position. I think just because you've been missing Tottenham at this stage in the game. And that's the trick right now. And then you bring in Silva, who is not a wing back. He's an attacker. He's a forward. He's a wide forward. And so you look to bolster your attack because you expect to get Tottenham back this week, hopefully, if not this week, then next. And you're able to have that symmetry create again on the right side, like you have been with your left. And I think that's so. One of the other things that I was going to talk about that I'll just shoehorn in here is St. Louis's targets in this transfer window. Before we get to the Twellman comments, St. Louis targeted attackers. Fredrik Jensen was the only other publicly known name of who Lutz was targeting, and Jensen is an attacking midfielder. He can play like he's a Marcel Hartle-ish, where he can play deeper if he needs to. He can play wide depending. He'd been playing as a right mid for Augsburg, but he's that attacking midfielder. And the deal was close. You know, it was reported the player, the American club, and the MLS failed to reach an agreement. That report came from Augsburg. And as far as I'm being told, that statement accurately captures what happened in this saga, this quest to sign Jensen. And there's wonders about his health and fitness because he had, I believe, 2 surgeries last year in the calendar year. But, you know, he had been playing in the Bundesliga this season for Augsburg. And that type of a player is who we were looking to sign. So you go from Jensen, whoever else might have been on the board, you go to Silva now, and you see the profile that Silva has in the attacking end. And you can pretty clearly see that whether it was because they expect somebody to not return, like a Rasmus Alm, or they're concerned about Rasmus Alm's health anyway, it was in that attacking end. There's no concern to me about Edu Leuven returning in who we were targeting for transfers. The only concern is bolstering our attack. And in fact, as I understand it, let me just get this out of the way. I don't have any news on Edu Leuven, but as far as everybody that I've talked to, he's coming back. There's no plans for the club to go without Edu Leuven for the duration of the season. I've seen this speculated on all the social medias that what if Leuven's gone for the season, or we don't expect him to return. There's some really inappropriate speculation on what might be going on, but the club is expecting him back soon. Maybe I don't know what soon looks like, whether it's next week, the week after, but the club is expecting him back. And so you're not looking to replace that central midfield spot. You're looking to replace an attacking mid. And that's what they were going for in this transfer window pretty clearly here at the very end.
Yep. And I think because I've asked that too, like maybe we need to just start packing up on, I don't know, on some eights, but I've loved Ostrak. I would love to see Ostrak get minutes. I'd hate to block Perez long term. It's some of the things.
You do worry about blocking all those homegrowns. Like you don't want to block Joyner, you don't want to block Pierce, but you have to understand
Silva where and Joyner, you know what I mean?
But you have to understand where they are in their development too, right?
Like, and you got to win, right? Like, we got to figure that out.
You have to win, but also Mekhi Joyner is not eligible to play this entire season. Like, let's be clear on that too, because I've also seen, well, why did we sign a potential left winger when you have Mekhi Joyner out there who can play that role? Well, Mekhi Joyner is only allowed 4 more MLS games this season. He's an off-roster homegrown, so he can't play every match. Like, they made his designation early in the season to allow him this year to develop a little more and have those here and there opportunities with City. But that's not a competition. It's not Joyner's missing out because Silva is here. It's Joyner's not being needed for these short-term emergency type loans in MLS play. Now,
I honestly think they knew Silva was coming, and they were like, these are the 2 games we got to get him in for. But he's playing a different position, actually, to be fair. So maybe that's not true. Maybe he'll keep getting chances.
Well, there's also a question of like what side Silva's going to be even playing on. And some folks are even speculating he might slot into the starting lineup on Sunday, which is possible. Very outside chance, but I'm with you. I don't think he does it yet. Especially when you do have an attacking trio with the consistency that you're trying to develop in Celio, Klaus, and Toyshirt. But it is going to be interesting to see if he supplements Celio Pompeo on the left side, or if they look to try to get both of them in the game at the same time to see what happens when they have that speed and the ball control. So it's not just speed, but it's Silva has an absolute willingness to control the ball. So, you know, there's a lot to like about what he can do with the ball at his feet in the attacking third. And it will give a different dimension. I think even more so than Celio, because he likes to be direct to goal more so than taking it out to the end line or taking it further out wide. He's a right-footed left winger, so he inverts much more than anything else.
Yeah, he may not be sitting out wide trying to dribble the whole time. So maybe they're different enough. That'll be interesting. And you know, you and I were talking about how the last game was more of a 3-4-3. So, you know, Toyshirt was out wide quite a lot. And so that's interesting. Was that in preparation for, you know, getting ready to play with 2 wide high attackers, a right winger and a left winger in Celio and Toyshirt? And then perhaps, you know, that's where Silva pops in as a sub or even a replacement if he's needed, if Celio starts to slag a little bit or something like that. Just really quick though, like Toyshirt out wide, I don't know if that's a good idea either.
I mean, he's quality, so he can play wherever he needs to. But it's like Marcel Hartl last season.
But he's such a fox in the box where he the ball falls to him and he puts it away. That seems to be how he scores. And he had the ball at his feet running forward. And I was so glad because I used to complain that was always Durkin with the ball at his feet going forward. And Toyshirt put a great shot on, you know, close to being on frame. It did, you know, it wasn't quite good enough, but that's not his bread and butter. And it's just like, man, you know, we want Hartl higher. I want Toyshirt in the middle, but we keep setting up with these players that need to play wide, and there's no perfect answer. I don't feel like there's any perfect combination of players Melberg's got his work cut out for him for sure. I like what he's trying. I like what he's doing. Like I said, we're figuring things out every week. But anyway,
and no, Toy Shirt has not been 100%. He's healthy. He's healthy. Yes, he doesn't have an injury that he's dealing with right now, but he's not 100% fit.
Yeah,
and so that's what Olaf had said as late as last week, and that's why Toy Shirt continues to sub out in these moments. He's not 90 minutes fit, so to speak.
Yeah. Absolutely good to keep that in mind. Let's move to Twellman. What did Twellman say?
Yeah, so Taylor Twellman had a handful of things to say about St. Louis City and his appearance on 101. The bullet points as I have them, courtesy of one of the Facebook fan groups. Thank you for putting these bullet points down. The team doesn't create enough chances and does not have the attacking players needed. That was a point that Twellman made. The team doesn't create enough chances and does not have the attacking players needed. I'm just going to go with these bullet points, and I'll circle back to what they are. The team is lacking in quality finishers. No one on the roster is capable of scoring 15-plus goals. He said you can play a boring style of game, but you have to win. No one is accepting the style without the results. Ownership needs to spend more money to bring in 3 or 4 higher quality players. He gave a few team examples that spent $20 million or more in the offseason, which we'll go over here in a minute. Twellman disagreed with Lutz on the talent evaluation of the current roster. That's notable because the roster has been created with that exact eye in mind. And Twellman wants to see the academy used more. Okay, so let's go back to the first point. The team doesn't create enough chances and does not have the attacking players needed. The first point is valid. We are 9th from last in non-penalty expected goals, and we're middle of the league in non-penalty expected goals per shot, meaning the quality of our chances created is meh, but we're creating far fewer of those in proportion overall this year. So the chance creation is low. Quality of chances that we do create is middling in MLS. To me, though, the biggest problem isn't our chances created, it's finishing those chances. So even if you can have a low number of quality chances created, you can have middle of the ground in your non-penalty expected goals, and you could be okay. You're not going to light the world on fire. There's tons of room for improvement. You're like, this isn't great, don't get me wrong, but because I think the biggest chance is finishing, we're second to last in goals minus expected goals, meaning we are finishing the second fewest from our expected goals in the entire league. This is a terrible efficient number. It means that even if we're middling in our non-penalty expected goals and the shots that we do get on target are middle of the pack in their quality, we're finishing second to last of that quality. Like, we're just not putting the ball in net when we do get some of these opportunities. And that's the biggest problem to me. I put that as a problem ahead of actual chance creation, because if we were finishing as many chances as we are expected to be finishing, we would probably have another 2 or 3 wins under our belt at this point. Like, that would be the difference. With the way our defense is playing, those individual goals in each of these games would be the difference maker. We could have 9 extra points at this point. I'm fairly
So does
positive.
that speak to the other part of his question, is we don't have the attacking players we need? Is that part of that?
Yeah, I mean, so the second question is, the team is lacking in quality finishers. No one on the roster is capable of scoring 15+ goals. And I mean, what is capable, really? Right? Like, do we want to get into the nuances of the word capable? Because that's
Luke said that Toy Shirt was a 12-goal season guy in Bundesliga 2, and that's probably true for MLS.
He scored 5 goals in 10 games last season.
Yeah.
He was on pace to be a Golden Boot contender if you extrapolate that out.
But it was but to be fair, it was on an attacking team that couldn't defend, right?
Sure,
the opposite of what we're dealing with now.
But that's beside this point, though, isn't it? The team is lacking.
I think it is the point. I'm just saying, like, that kind of is the point, because I think that's kind of what Taylor is getting at, is like, we need to score goals or get the I'm going to the next bullet point, right? Because like, is he a 15-goal scorer only because we're attacking like hell and not defending? what maybe Taylor's saying we need a 15+ goal scorer that can score 15 goals even when you're bunkered in. I don't know what he's saying. I can't speak for him.
Your problem's the coach then. And Taylor's problem is the coach, not the players. Because the team is not lacking in quality finishers to the magnitude that he's trying to portray it. No one on the roster is capable of scoring 15+ goals. I'm going to call BS on that. Klaus and Teuscher are capable of scoring 15 goals. Each. Teuscher scored 5 goals in 10 games last year. If your argument is the quality of the player, that's one thing. If your argument is the system that the player is playing in, not facilitating the best of his quality, that's a totally different thing.
It absolutely is, yes.
And Klaus scored 10 goals in his first season while missing time. Like if he hadn't missed time with the clip that he was on, he's a 15 goal scorer. Now, 20 goals, if you want to start going with the next magnitude, I don't know if we have a 20 goal scorer on our team. That might be a little egregious, but at the same time, last year in 2024, there were only 4 20+ goal scorers in the entire league. You're talking four of 29 teams had a 20+ goal scorer. There were 16 15+ goal scorers. So you're starting to get a little bit more of like, okay, we can be a part of this party. There were multiple teams that had 2 15+ goal scorers. So 16 total 15+ goal scorers last season. LAFC, Miami, LA Galaxy, and Portland had 2 each in that list of 16 15+ goal scorers. One 15+ goal scorer for St. Louis would do wonders, but I really do think it's entirely debatable because you're talking about the quality of the player and what their potential is versus are they in a style that suits them and that can actually draw out the 15+ goals.
I want to say this. Klaus has had 3 really good seasons scoring goals. First was in that Finnish league, which is pretty low quality. That was 21 goals. So he got a lot. He got 12 with Lask in the Austrian Bundesliga.
Okay.
And then next was 10 goals with MLS in 23 under Carnell.
This is Klaus?
That's Klaus. So he's really not a 15-goal scorer. So I think we need to remember that, I guess, when we watch him.
Well, I mean, if you're going to say, so I can acquiesce to that. I can cede that point. But I also, the point is the other side of Klaus is what he does in addition to goal scoring.
Yeah.
So if he gets 10 or 12 goals, then whatever else he is doing to facilitate, to hold up the ball, to have one of the key passes or a hockey assist, that's value right there in what the quality of the player is. Now, it's not to Taylor's point of the team lacking quality finishers, because you still need, if you're going to have Klaus score 10 to 12 goals, you do need to supplement that with another double-digit goal scorer to really separate yourself from teams. And Teuscher, to me, can be that player.
I think so. And sometimes your high goal scorer is a winger. You know, like maybe Hartl is able to move up once Leuven's back, and that solves all the problems, you know?
Well,
and maybe he unlocks Teuscher and Klaus together as well.
Hartl's an interesting question, though, because I think Hartl does a lot of bit of everything. I mentioned Teuscher because in the 2 seasons before joining St. Louis City in the 2 Bundesliga for Hanover, in 22 to 23, he had 14 goals, 3 assists. And in 23 and 24, he had 11 goals. It was 14 goals in 29 matches, 11 goals in 27 matches. But as far as starts go, because I think he had some injuries, 14 goals in 19 starts, 11 goals in 12 starts. So again, the efficiency was there for Cedric Teuscher. What we're seeing now in this drought is abnormal for what Cedric Teuscher has been doing in the past few years. There's a reason why I tout him so highly in his finishing. And I think that we're forgetting what he's capable of, because it wasn't just 14 in 22-23, 11 in 23-24. But when he stepped into St. Louis, like I said, 5 goals in 10 games. That's my 15+ goal scorer if I had to pick one on St. Louis City. When you look at what Marcel Hartl's been doing, I think you see capability. You don't see replicability. So Teuscher had a couple seasons where he's about that with the number of matches that he played in, kind of being able to extrapolate, like you stay healthy, though he hasn't been healthy to start the season. So I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot on that argument. But Marcel Hartl had 17 goals in the 23-24 season with St. Pauli. Not just 17 goals, but this is why I say that I don't know if Hartl's the 15-20 goal scorer. 17 goals and 12 assists. So if you're looking for a Denny Bwanga type player, not necessarily playing the same position, but is the focal point of your offense, that's Marcel Hartl.
Well said.
And that's why it's been so difficult to see Marcel Hartl drop back into the central midfield, and because we know what he's capable of in the final third. Like, that's 17 goals and 12 assists in one season in the 2 Bundesliga for St. Pauli, earning them promotion. That's what we paid for. That's our designated player that we need to get back. And that is an answer to Taylor's question of the team is lacking in quality finishers.
Yeah, and I think we can tie a bow on this too. Jeremy Clements says, is it higher quality, or does it need to be higher quality that fits the system? And I think that's what pulls all of this together, right?
Yes.
As we see improvements every single week, once we have Totland and Leuven back, I think we can actually start judging this team, because then I think we would have a pretty darn good lineup with most of our intended key pieces in place, right? And then we can see perhaps what Mellberg was hoping to put together. And even if he wasn't hoping to put together, it's something that surely he got the job saying, this is a roster I can work with, right? And I think then we can start judging the coach. But either way, I think knowing that Klaus is, a 10 goal at best kind of guy around MLS, Teuscher can do 5 and 10 on an offensive team. What can he do under Mellberg at his best with a good team around him? Building a team around Hartl, right? And maybe even like putting, we let him float and we create overloads constantly. I think even Volum's been really good at that too. But maybe there needs to be a little bit with some more quality. Perhaps he won't have to drop back as much, even when he's playing like as a 10 or a left winger, a floating attacker. Like, I think we still need to maximize our players in the right positions. And I think the problem is we're just not there yet. Still, we're still just stopping the bleeding, but perhaps in the next month or two, we can start seeing actual progress toward like what Mellberg is like. I can work with this. I can take these parts and make something.
Yeah, and I think an example of that is when you had this past game against Vancouver, Marcel Hartl was dropping back into like a left back role when we were playing out of goal. So some of Ben Lund's goal kicks were going over to Marcel Hartl, and I saw it 3 times, and I saw it work. What he was doing, it was putting Marcel, but I don't like the fact that he had to move into this position to do it. It was moving Marcel Hartl to the left back spot. It was moving Conrad Wallem to a central midfield role, and it was almost like a set piece out of goal, because you would send it to Marcel Hartl. He would start the play. He would clear space, play it up. And I showed this on Fallout with audio for everybody who saw. But it was play the ball to Hartl, get it to Wallem, and then when you pass it to Wallem, Hartl continues to move upfield, and it's a give and go. So eventually, you're getting the ball to Marcel Hartl in transition, in stride, passing the midfield line, and now suddenly Marcel Hartl is leading your attack, but he started from that left back spot. Like, this is the kind of wildness that we're seeing from Olaf Mellberg in how he's trying to maximize that quality of a player. Because if you're at goal, Bradley Carnell would have sent it long. He would have told Roman Berkey, just send it long. Look up. If you see Klaus's head, kick the ball to him. But Olaf is more instructing Ben Lund to have these design pieces to involve the best quality players that you have. It's no coincidence to me that with all the players on the field in that game, the second half of Vancouver, that those plays were designed to maximize Marcel Hartl and Conrad Wallem, exclusively those 2 players, to get the ball from the goal to the attacking third. That's those quality type players. Now, whether you talk about quality finishers, I do think if you get Teuscher and Klaus more involved in that, we haven't seen enough from Salio to know if he can be that player either, because Salio was on a good goal scoring streak before he was injured last season. That's another thing, is because of injuries, we also don't have the answer to that question of capability of scoring 15 plus goals. I think Salio, I'm not saying Salio can be that person, but if you look at what he was doing at the beginning of last season before his injury, the potential, if not capability, is there to me.
Yeah. And like I said, if he slumps, I think that's where we see Silva take exactly that spot. Because Celio's been impressing us. He's much better than we thought he'd ever be. He's a perfect tool for St. Louis right now as we struggle. But, once everything's clicking, if he slumps, I think having someone else to put in there is pretty important. I want to just ask you this, Matt. Twellman has a list here of things.
Yep.
How many of these can we be like, these are actually good, whether or not they're true, these are actually good goals. Maybe this is a nice checklist for like what City should be aiming for,
Well, I mean, they should be aiming for all of them.
Then it's not like, is it true or not? I don't know. Like, that's a great conversation. I think we've covered that pretty well, but I do think if St. Louis does all of these things, even with the players they have or not, that would be a pretty good situation, right?
The only thing you could possibly disagree with is the talent evaluation. So like, to me,
exactly.
I would say number 5, disagree with Lutz on the talent evaluation of the current roster. That's something that you could have a legitimate argument of like, I don't think we want that. If you really like the players that Lutz has put together, everything else, my disagreements with Taylor aren't the merit of the question. It's whether they apply to this team or not.
Yeah.
The team doesn't create enough chances, doesn't have the attacking players needed, lacking quality finishers. Those are the 2 biggest questions that I've really addressed. And I think that I think there's an argument to be made against those. You can play a boring style of game, but you have to win. No one's accepting the style without results. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Zero question with that. 100% true on that. Want to see the academy used more? I'm all for using the academy, but I don't want to just throw guys out there. I don't want to see Mekhi Joyner, Caden Glover, Miguel Perez, and Tyson Pierce all start an MLS game just to play the academy. Like I'm not privy to see what their form and fitness is behind closed doors. I see Caden Glover not starting for City 2, and that's questionable at times when that's happening. But that's a trust the system, trust the organization that they're properly evaluating the academy. So if you have a problem with the overall talent evaluation of the current roster on the first team, maybe that extends to how you're evaluating the academy. And that opens up kind of Pandora's box in a whole lot of different ways. But the one thing that I do look at that I think we all agree fundamentally, ownership needs to spend more money, right? But I disagree with the fact that there's a correlation, a direct correlation between spending money and being successful in this league. We've seen it every single time those articles come out about the MLSPA, the salary spend, the salary guide. There's always a mixture. There's always teams that are somehow maximizing the low roster spend they have, and they're these Cinderella type teams.
Yeah.
And then there's always the Inter Miamis, the FC Cincinnati's lately, where they are spending a lot of money and they are having continued consistent success. There's a mixture, but the 2 play together, those 2 things. There's the talent evaluation, and then there's the ownership willing to spend money. Because if you're spending money on crap, you're not going to be successful. And so that's where I brought this stat in, is looking at what Twellman's examples were, the teams that spent over 20 million. I pulled from Transfermarkt the top 6 teams in this previous window's spend. It's Atlanta, Austin, FC Cincinnati, San Diego, New England Revolution, and Houston Dynamo. Now, San Diego may be a freebie because they're an expansion team and they built their roster, but they spent big. Chucky Lozano wasn't cheap. You have 3 teams that are currently at match week 10. You have 3 teams that are near the bottom of their conference, and you have 3 teams that are near the top of their conference, which is why I go with there's zero correlation to spending big and winning thus far in this season regarding this transfer window. Atlanta's in 12th, New England Revolution are in 11th, Houston is in 14th, but you have FC Cincinnati in 2nd, Austin in 2nd, and San Diego in 6th. You can't just say spend more money and you'll be successful, especially if you disagree with Lutz's talent evaluation. Spending more money is not going to fix that. You need a new sporting director with talent evaluation you agree with before ownership spends the money. Like, that's the sequence that Taylor is really getting at with what his points of concern were.
Yep. And, I think you that was the long version of like, I think if any of these things go wrong, I think you have to make up for it somehow. So if Lutz isn't able to get more quality for the money, then we got to make up for it by either working harder, having a coaching system or a coach that can get more out of those players. And if the coach has to play a system that just can do everything except get the goal scoring, then maybe we're going to have to spend more money. Like something's got to give somewhere.
Yeah.
So if Melberg's not able to figure this out, then we probably are going to have to spend millions of dollars on a striker that can score even when he doesn't get the ball. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's the only option, but there are several, things that are working together that sometimes money might be the thing that we have to spend because we've messed up all the other things. And you just have to look at it in a pot, like it's all working together. So, is money the problem? Maybe. Is the system the problem? Maybe. Is Melberg the problem? Maybe. Is Lutz actually not getting good players? Maybe. I think all of these are options. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other things, but they all need to work in tandem. And so, I think if this season goes bad, we have another bad season, one of those things needs to be changed, at least, like drastically.
Well, if this season goes bad, if we miss the playoffs this season, I think we're going to hear a lot from Diego Gigliani. I'll tell you that.
I see. In what way? Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, he's the GM, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be him that makes the big moves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Of all of those things. Okay. So we haven't talked about the transfers some more.
We've already gone pretty long. So I think there was a best and worst list put together of the transfers overall in the league, and FC Cincinnati was pretty across the board named as the best team to do transfer business. And this is unfortunately, I think, the team to strive to be when it comes to the transfer market, because they lost a couple of really good difference makers and they were able to restock their entire team. I didn't ask one thing that this kind of parlays into, because they've been doing work across the board and we don't really need to get into like all of this stuff because they're league wide stuff. You can read these online in the Tom Bogert's Give Me Sport article. I think there does need to be an evening out of transfer windows, whether they change in MLS and the transfer dates that they may change, they may not. That's a point of contention that a lot of people have, is the MLS transfer windows varying so disparately from the rest of the world and from most of the other leagues, especially with the other leagues that have the talent that we really want, both in South America and in Europe. By having that difference, you're kind of limiting what you can do in your windows league wide. You're not maximizing the caliber of player you can bring in because your interests as teams don't align with the interests of other teams. Like in March and April, teams are in promotion battles just as much as they are in relegation battles, right? Teams that are struggling, that may be looking to offload players, they're not going to want to give up players if they're fighting against relegation, for instance. So that's why this transfer window in particular is so difficult. But somehow other teams are able to maximize the winter transfer window. And putting all of our eggs in, and I wanted to ask Andrew Wiebe this a few weeks ago, but we ran out of time. Putting all your eggs in the summer transfer window has its merits. And we were ecstatic with what that meant for this season. But I think we're really seeing the other side of the coin on this, where if you do that and something goes wrong or different than you expected on your coaching change, then suddenly you're not maximizing anything. And that's where, like, the winter transfer window, in the work we did, and the money that we had to spend or whatever it was, we added pieces. We added strategic pieces to complement the big changes that we made to the core of our club last summer. And whether you do that because you intend for the coach to have a certain style, or whether you do that because you're just wanting to ride the success of last season, we're seeing the unfortunate negatives to that process, I think. And I look at these other teams that have had success in this transfer window, like FC Cincinnati, like Philadelphia had a pretty good signing, and they've had a couple. Atlanta has had some really good signings, but they've not had the success to follow it. Igor Jesus was a U22 signing that we're going to see for LAFC, the defensive midfielder. That's a U22 who's going to be facing St. Louis. That's a good signing.
Yeah.
Colorado had some cash for trade signings. They signed Josh Atencio, Ted Duque Pietro, or Coup de Pietro. Like those are some good moves. Intra-league moves have a lot of value lately, especially with this cash for trades market. San Jose, New England massively changed their roster this window. And so, I just think we're early in our history as St. Louis City SC, but there are lessons to be learned in how these transfer windows have had successes. We had success following the summer window last season. We have not had success following the winter transfer window this season so far, or at least leading up to the end of the winter transfer window. So there are lessons to be learned no matter who the sporting director is. The people in charge, like Diego, namely, because he's the GM and president of the entire club. Like that's where the lesson has to be learned of you're not married to Lutz in the longevity of your time as GM and president. I think Lutz has done a fine job in what he's put together, quality of player on the field, and I've said as much. But these are overall things you have to evaluate. Of ownership maybe has a lot to do with it. If you're limiting to free transfers and his ability to negotiate, some of these are less than other teams. Like all of that plays into probably the ability to bring talent in the winter transfer window. I just hope that the club is learning the value that this window has in addition to the summer. And to your point, Phil, probably need to spend a little more to be active in that market.
Well, if the other stuff doesn't go well, is all I was saying. But yeah,
even if it does go well, you don't rest on your laurels. Like FC Cincinnati, I hate using them as the example, but they're not resting on what they're doing. Like they're continuing they overhaul their roster when they have curveballs thrown against them. Imagine last season if we finished the season and Marcel Hartl was like, guys, this isn't what I'm out. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm not coming back. That's kind of like what Lucho Acosta did to them at the end of last season. He basically pieced out and said, just figure out a move because I'm not coming back. And they dealt with it. They figured out a way to bring in a Vander, and they figured out a way to bring in the highest paid transfer player, Kevin Denke.
That's a good point.
Like they didn't rest on their laurels.
He's very good.
They handled the adversity that was in front of them because they were willing to spend money. Like that kind of, as I talk, I'm agreeing with you entirely. That kind of is the most freeing aspect, is the ability to adapt is contingent upon the ability to spend money.
Yeah. And Cincinnati's a good example. You give several good examples. And again, LAFC just continuing to lose a guy, bring in someone smarter, like a smart move. They've been hitting.
Ilie Sanchez was their number 6 the last time we played him. He's one of
the best.
55 years old at this point. I mean, he's probably 36. He's still younger than me, obviously. So but Igor Jesus, rather. Sorry, Ilie Sanchez. Igor Jesus has U20. They replaced him with a U22. Like, you offload somebody, you send somebody out who has been a stalwart in your midfield, and you replace them with a U22 that's hitting already.
Exactly.
If only we had a central defensive midfielder U22 that would have hit already.
Ready to go. That's interesting.
Ready to go. Yeah.
I imagine Jesus costs a lot of money, right? Just to circle back to that one.
Oh yeah, he could not have been cheap.
Whereas JGR probably was a good deal. So
JGR was
depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean the difference is about $3.5 million. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
JGR was an $800,000 transfer fee, and Igor Jesus was a $4.2 million fee. So yeah, a little bit of difference.
Well, good stuff. I think we've worked through and some questions. We've asked a lot of questions. We've posed some solutions or possible, fixes to the problem, possible. Just pointing out the problems to me has kind of been helpful and best of all, therapeutic.
Hopefully at the very least, you're thinking a little bit more. Like don't just hear one person say something. Just take some other perspectives, think about things a little holistically, different viewpoints, ask questions. Like that's my biggest thing is you hear somebody who is extraordinarily knowledgeable in this sport and this league in particular, like Taylor Twellman. And the things that he says are very obvious. Like if you don't create chances, if you don't have quality finishers, if you play a boring style of game, like all those things don't lead to success. But ask yourself at face value, even underlying numbers, is all of that exactly true? Or like, is there more to it than what we're actually seeing? Like watch the games back, watch the goal opportunities, watch the progressions, watch the finishing that we see and that we saw last year. You know, there's reasons to ask questions rather than just take what somebody who is on a national landscape says about your team, because they don't get to evaluate everything as in depth as we do, as you guys do. Yeah. And they're not paying attention to this 24/7 like we all are.
Yeah. I mean, like they couldn't riff on St. Louis City and the transfer market and Twellman and Doyle for an hour straight. I think they'd run out of things to say. So they're not watching the team like that, especially. So
I hope you've enjoyed this episode because
hope so too.
The end of the transfer window is always an interesting episode. It could go a lot of different ways. This is there's reason for cautious optimism. There's a new player that we have not seen at all, and so there's excitement around that. We just went toe to toe with the best two teams in the league, and we've got a tough away match ahead of us. Yeah. So, you know, Sunday Night Soccer, all eyes are on St. Louis. Like I told Timo Baumgartel this past week, Sunday Night Soccer is the thing in MLS, and I had to liken it to I almost messed up my time zones with it when I was talking to him, telling him it's like the late morning Bundesliga game. And I was like, wait, I don't know. It's like the Bundesliga game that happens after all the other ones are played. Like, that's the feature one. I don't know what the time difference is, like 5 o'clock, something like that.
Yeah, I think of them as late morning too, Matt. That's good. That's good.
But we get all eyes on St. Louis and LAFC, and so, you know, this is our third one of these already. Austin, Columbus, and now LAFC. So it's always fun to have that spotlight, and hopefully we make the most of it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited for the game. No matter, I mean, you guys know that. No matter what, and I think everyone listening feels the same way. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, again, enjoy that game against LAFC on Sunday. And we'll be talking about that the following day, as Matt and Santi always do. And then we'll be breaking down the next one and the next one and the next one all season. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.